possible. We are going to talk about There Are No Overachievers with our good friend, Brina Biro. Y'all, this is going to be a killer show.
Good morning.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Ryan, did you hear that? I busted out a y'all in the intro. Did you hear that?
Y'all.
Yowl.
Y'all. Y'all are going to love this.
Y'all,
yeah.
You
Well,
can
Brian
always tell
was just
somebody
talking
who's
about
making
being
it
in
up because they make
Texas.
it 2 syllables. You all. No. It's y'all.
Yeah. It's just, I've been told that I need to condense what I say because I've been told I talk a lot, Brian. Personally, I don't feel that, but hey, so
Debatable.
I was on the phone with Daman yesterday. He says, all you got to do is you got to get what you want to say out in less words. And so y'all, now I'm starting to combine my words. You know what I mean?
You're on the path. You're on the path. Way to go, buddy.
It's a start. So,
Yes, it is.
Brian, you know what, my friend? Thank you so much for being here again. And we got a special coming up on the 13th, and you're going to be part of that too, which is going to be super cool. You sent me this a couple of months back, and I love this book. So I was hoping we can dive right into, you know, the idea of there are no overachievers and how to seize the windows of opportunity, and just kind of have a really cool conversation before we get going today.
I love it. I mean, it's a you know, the title itself came from and really lit my fire to write this book about 20 years before. And it came from my good friend, the man who wrote the foreword for my first book, and I believe the greatest coach of all time, John Wooden. For anybody who's watching doesn't know who John Wooden was the UCLA basketball coach from 1948 to 1975. We're still talking about him in 2022. Yep. His teams at UCLA won 10 national championships. Context, no other coach in history of men's college basketball has won more than 5. Coach K won 5 in 42 years. Coach Wooden won 10 in his last 12 years. But he'd also be the first to tell you he didn't win any in the first 27 years that he coached. He used to say, it's what you learn after you know everything that makes the difference. But when I met him, one of the things that just jolted me, when I first met him, I was running a large training company, and I had grown up admiring him and thought, what would be better than to interview the greatest of them all? Because he was the ultimate team builder. And so I called him up. He answered the phone. I almost fell over backwards. I stuttered, mumbled, drooled a little bit, said, can I come and interview you? And he said, sure. But one of the things he said during that conversation was, you know, Brian, there are no overachievers. And I went, what? He said, we are all underachievers. He said, we have so much more in us than we ever dreamed of. All right? And so reaching the potential is moving in the direction of living up to what you already have inside of you. We're given so many gifts, but through the power of fear, through the power of doubt, worry, what we perceive as obstacles, so many different ways, we don't recognize what we really have inside of us. So that seed was planted 20 some years before I wrote the book to help people, because many times great people say, he's an overachiever. No, you've got even more in you than you ever thought possible. So that's what brought me to be on your show today, to get to talk about this whole concept.
Okay, so then, I mean, let's go dive in. I want to make sure everybody gets this, because you are right. You know, there's so many people. Oh, well, you know, look at that salesperson and look how much business they're doing. I could never do that. You know, I don't have their talents. I don't have their oomph-spa. I don't have their gift of the gab. I don't have all that. And there's all those worries, fears, and doubts that fly through all of us. I mean, how many of us have had a really cool idea and then followed it up by, oh, no, it's not possible. Like, I couldn't do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I guess a great starting place, besides the title, that there are no overachievers, is one other thing that Coach Wooden gave me. And this won't be a Coach Wooden talk, but he did give a foundation in that same conversation. The way he came to that and provided that idea that there are no overachievers. I asked him this question. I said, Coach, what's the difference between a good team and a great team? And I had been a coach, and I had kind of some preconceived notions of what he'd say. What's the difference between a good team and a great team? And it first shocked me because as a coach, I expected him to say, well, it starts with recruiting and talent. You got to have the recruiting, you got to have the talent. And the first thing he said was, Brian, it has nothing to do with recruiting or talent. He says, there are no overachievers. He says we have, so he shocked me by that first. And the next thing he said really got my attention even more. He said, Brian, the difference between a good team, basketball team, and a great basketball team, exactly the same difference between a good parent and a great parent, between a good company and a great company, between a good anything and a great anything. So now he had my undivided attention. He said, after a lifetime of working with people, which is what we all do, I don't care who you are, you're in the people business. You're a trucker, you're in the people business. It's the relationships you build. It's the way people think of you that's going to connect them. It's the relationships you build. It's how you grow and help others grow that determines how far you will go. And he said, after a lifetime of working with people, it became clear to him that the difference that made the difference between good and great, whether it's in your parenting, in your business, in the fulfillment of your life, came down to the difference between two words. He said, good or average parents, good or average teachers, coaches, truckers, anythings, good or average are willing to support each other in the greater good and goals of the team. And the key word he used was willing. Now, I got to tell you, I always thought willing is a really good word. It is way better than unwilling. Right? But then he described it in a way that I bet many of us can kind of relate to, whether now or back in the past. He said, willing is about the same spirit, effort, and energy with which teenagers clean their rooms. Yeah, they'll do it because they really hope to eat this week. He said, but they're not excited about it. He said, on a great team, a great parent, a great podcast host, a great trucker, a great teacher, a great anything, those people are absolutely eager to do whatever it takes. No job is too big, no job is too small. No job starts too early or ends too late. He said, it's only when you break through from being merely willing to being eager that you have a chance to approach your potential. Now, when he said it, I'm kind of a visual guy, and I got this picture in my mind. I invented this thing that I call the eager meter. So picture you're in your truck, you got that accelerator, right? You got that miles per hour. Well, on the left-hand side at 0 is willing. On the right-hand side at 200 miles an hour is eager. And here's the big question. Where is your eager meter pointing? All right, and that eager meter, here's the most powerful and magnificent truth about your eager meter, no matter where it is. And that is you're 100% in charge of that eager meter. In other words, nobody can ever give up for you. Yeah. Nobody else controls your own faith, your own hope, your own energy. And so the goal of writing this book was to help everyone who reads it to move at least one notch in the direction towards eager and away from merely being willing when it comes to standing tall, right, and moving in the direction of your breakthrough potential. All right, so that's kind of where the whole thing started. Right, and how do you do that? That's the fun of it. How do you break through from good to great? How do you break through from willing to eager? How do you live a life where you really recognize that you have the opportunity every day to move closer to that potential? And that's what this book is about. And it breaks into the 3 sections in the book, 3 areas, 3 what I call controllables. The only way you're going to approach your real potential is to start to focus on controlling your controllables. Think about it. Whenever you're focused on the things that you do control, how do you feel? You feel confident. You feel momentum. You feel I can, or I can get this done, or we can get this done. It's when we focus on the things we don't control that we get scared, lost, disillusioned. And so there are 3, after a lifetime of working on this, because that's what I focus on all the time. I realized there are 3 foundational areas, 3 foundational controllables that if you master them, then you are absolutely going to achieve what you're capable of achieving. You're going to move to your potential. And the first is called Shaping Your Future. It's about vision. And so the first part of There Are No Overachievers focuses on this essence of how do you create a vision that moves you in the direction you want to go. All right. And so really there's two foundational concepts there. The first is something that you know, Dan, you know about, Jeff, Brian, you guys work on this every day. And the principle says what you focus on is what you create.
Yeah.
Now, big distinction. It's not what you get. Not many people say what you focus on is what you get. But without jumping in the game, without getting off the sidelines and taking the shot, you get Zippo. All right. So what you focus on what you focus on is what you create is determined only when you actually get in the game. In other words, when you take personal responsibility for that vision. All right. So I've done this before with you guys, I think, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm a 5-year-old kid. All right. I'm my 6-year-old grandson, Augie, and I'm riding a 2-wheeler bike for the first time. And I got my hands on those handlebars. I got my feet on the pedals. I got my tongue sticking out for balance. All right. Now, mom and dad are holding that back fender. Then they're running with me and they're encouraging me, and I'm wobbling and I'm shaking and I'm trying to find that balance. And finally, I get enough momentum that they let me go, and I'm doing it. I'm riding my bike. Way to go! Unfortunately, right in front of me on the sidewalk, that first time I'm on that bike, is a great big rock. What do I focus on? The rock.
Focus on the rock. Yeah.
What happens next? Bam! I nail that rock. I fall over. I scrape up my little elbow. I walk by my mom, like I walk by my dad, like I'm cool. Hey, no problem, Dad. Go by mom and go, I'm gonna die. All right. So same little kid, 2 weeks later, same bike, right? No tongue out anymore. Don't need it anymore. Got this bike riding thing down. Boppity, 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 bop. All right. Right in front of me, bigger rock. What happens now?
You go around it.
Around it.
And what goes around it first?
The bike.
Nope.
No, your eyes.
Your vision.
Your eyes.
Oh, that's
vision.
true. That's true.
In other words, what you've learned is what you focus on is what you create. That's the start. Whether you focus. Now, would it have done that little guy any good to go, there's no rock, there's no rock, there's no rock, there's no rock? No, would have been worse. There are rocks. We've had one called COVID. All right, Dan, you've been facing a huge rock. Right? You can't pretend the rock isn't there. You see it, but then you use the magic, and that's where you shape your future to say, okay, I see the rock. Now, how am I going to get around it? How am I going to jump over it? How am I going to dissolve it? All right. So that is the first key to shaping your future, understanding that what you focus on is what you create. And so if you want to create a future you want, when you start to look at that obstacle, you shift your energy and you shift your vision to move around it. The second key to that breakthrough vision that shaped the future, that allows you to begin to move to your potential, is to no longer depend upon your memory to see. You know, you've been in my course before, Dan, and I often ask people, it'd be really fun to do this with a lot of people in the trucking industry. I ask the question, what color is a yield sign? Right? And
yes,
98% of the close to 1 million people that I've spoken to over the last 31 years say yellow.
Hold on. Ryan and Jeff, what color is a yield sign?
It's red and white.
No,
it's the triangle one.
Yeah. It's
Ryan,
yellow.
you're one of
It's
the
yellow and
2%
black.
that ever got it right. They're red and
it's
white.
yellow.
Upside down triangle, red and white. But 98% of the audiences and people who are really have nothing to do with intelligence say yellow. Every audience I've ever spoken to yells out, they're yellow. And then I say, well, 45 years ago, the United States at least switched to the international signage standards, and every yield sign you've seen is red and white. All right. And I showed them it. Yeah, way to go. All right. Jeff, I don't know what I would have done without you. And to tell you the truth, Dan said yellow the first time too. So
100%. And I think we yelled it out at the Matrix.
you did.
Yeah.
So here's the question. Why don't all of those people, why don't most of us see what's right in front of us?
Yeah.
And the reason comes down to revealing the truth. Why don't we see? Because you've seen thousands of yield signs. You see the same yield signs every day. In the same way that you see your family every day. You see your job every day. You see yourself every day. So you've seen thousands of yield signs and you haven't seen one of them for what's right in front of you. And the question is why? And the reason why reveals a truth about most of us, that once we see it, we can transform our vision. And here's what it is. Almost everyone I know, you, me, my family, my team, your team, almost everyone I know actually rarely uses their vision to see. Mm-hmm. We don't use our vision. You know what we use instead? We use our memory and our conditioning. Yeah. And whenever you use your memory to see, you do not see what is, you see what was. And the second you lock onto what was, guess what you block out?
The future.
Yeah, and what is. You like what is and what could be. Now, that's well and good for yield signs, and I hope everybody will join me, because I am the happiest driver I know. Because every time I see a yield sign, I start cracking up. I'm thinking, what else have I been missing lately? Let me warn everybody out there. About the next 3 weeks or so, every time you drive by a yield sign, it's going to feel like it leaps out of the cement and whacks you in the back of the head.
Like, I didn't even know there was one there before. now I see it. Yeah.
But where does it matter to all of us to no longer depend upon our memory to see? One word: people. People. Change the way you look at people. The people you look at change. Mm-hmm. Change the way you see yourself. The self you see will change. As soon as you see that I'm not an overachiever, you start looking for your potential. You start looking for the places you can break through. Now, I want to get everybody to get this not in their heads. You ever notice our heads have all these holes in it? Stuff falls out all the time. Whereas if we can get it in our heart, it gets in our bloodstream, it's with us forever. Yeah. And the best story I can tell about how that shift in vision can create breakthroughs. When my oldest daughter, Kelsey, went away to college, oh my goodness, we missed her so much. I remember dropping her off at school at Elon University, and I sobbed for 3 hours on the way home driving. I'm talking ugly crying. I mean, but you talk about seeing a yield sign for the first time. When Kelsey came home the very first time from college for Thanksgiving holiday, I finally had this enormous breakthrough. I finally realized how long I've been looking at my daughter, though I love her completely. I've been staring at her forever as if she were an old yellow yield sign. I've been looking at her like she's still my 10-year-old. Mm-hmm. Hey, she'd been driving her own car for 2.5 years. Every morning she was waking up hundreds of miles away, deciding completely for herself what she's going to do with that incredible gift called today. She walked in our door that Thanksgiving, a smile the size of the Carolinas, immediately announced to her mother and I that she'd already applied for, already been accepted, to go do a very special service program in Ghana, in Africa. Because Kelsey, like you, Dan, like you, Ryan, like you, Jeff, wants to make the world a little bit better every day.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked at my daughter that day, maybe for the very first time. And I finally understood that every time I looked at her as if she were an old yellow yield sign, what happened to our relationship? I went backwards until I looked at the wisdom, the courage, the incredible young woman that was right in front of me. See, one of my greatest goals in writing this book is for everyone to rise up and from this moment on become a world-class yield sign finder. About the people that you lead and serve, about the people that you love, but most of all about the person you look at in the mirror. Because when you change the way you look at people, the people you look at change. Change the way you see yourself, the self you see will change. I often ask in my seminars, and I always get somebody who says this. I ask, who in this room, when you first met your husband or your wife, couldn't stand them? All right. And there's always somebody who raises their hand. All right. And so if they'd have stayed with that, if they stayed with their memory to see, they never would have broken through. Yeah. All right. But they started to open their eyes to fresh every day. So in that first area of moving towards your potential, to discovering that you're not an overachiever and really growing, it starts with vision, and it starts with those two principles. What you focus on is what you create, and become a world-class yield sign finder. And there's one last piece to that, and that is it's a function of vision in a way, and it's called humility. Mm-hmm. And to become a humble person is to open your vision to possibility. Now, let me clarify that. a lot of people have the mistaken impression, especially in the last several years when there's been more, I don't know, more focus on reputation than character. A lot of people think, well, if I'm humble, I'm not really confident. Not true. You can be incredibly humble and incredibly confident, because being humble doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself less.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's so crucial to your vision to be a humble breakthrough leader is that only those who are humble are lifelong learners. Because only those who are humble would rather be wrong and learn something from it than to pretend they're always right. You know, it's one of the things I love the most about you, Dan. You are truly a humble breakthrough leader. Every day you'd want to grow. Every day you want to learn. Every day, that's why you all are doing this show, to pick up maybe one little pearl that either reminds you of something that you maybe have forgotten, or that opens your vision to that new red and white yield sign. So the last piece to vision is one that we don't normally think about. It is be a humble visionary. All right, because oftentimes the greatest obstacle to learning a truth is the belief that you already know it. All right, and when you open your eyes to that new possibility, that's when you break through. Because if you keep seeing the same thing over and over again, you're going to keep creating the same results over and over again.
Yeah.
Wow. That's better than reading the book, Brian.
I think you know, when you get back to that yellow or red yield sign, I think what happens when you talk about being a visionary and having that vision is that you take it for granted, and maybe your mind just sees it and you know what to do when you see it, but you don't really think about it too much as you move through that yield sign until you're asked, what color is it, right? And then automatically maybe your mind just says, oh, yellow, because you really never thought about the sign. You just know what it means.
Exactly right. And there's an element to it that isn't memory, it's conditioning. And here's how I found that out in a really fun way. When my daughters were growing up, their senior year in high school, both of them, I came in many times to their classes. They were in a small school, and I did my whole program for them. They broke boards at the end. It was awesome. All right. But I asked them, what color is a yield sign? Now, these people had never seen red yield signs because they were kids. They all said yellow. And I went, wow, it's not just memory, it's memory and conditioning. Conditioning is what generates the memory we hold on to. In other words, most other signs that we've grown up with, most other road signs are yellow and black. And so we stop looking. We assume. All right, and that's why conditioning and memory are what cause us to do exactly what you just said, Jeff. We stop looking. That's covered. All right, and then the breakthroughs are stopped when we stop using our vision to see.
So, Brian, I'd like you to go back to something there for a minute, because I still have my board from when I met you 15 years ago, 14 years ago now.
Something like that.
Probably pretty close. So Brian does a program where you put the things you want to break through, whether it be, you know, like always forward thinking, you know, achieving, seizing the woo, whatever it is, and you write it on the board, and then you actually break the board as part of his whole program. And I actually have that on my toolbox. Mounted on my toolbox. I'll bring it to the 13th show, but it's pretty cool because sometimes I pull off the board and I look at what I wrote on the back, and it's quite a wow, because it's like I'm still going for it. A window of opportunity, yes, and I'm still going for it. So I thank you for that. That is, when you said the board, I was like, oh my gosh, I still look at mine probably every week.
Well, you know, I'm so glad you talked about that, because just to talk a little bit more, because it'll emphasize this first key to stopping thinking that you're an overachiever. It really works on the vision. The board breaking experience is the greatest combination, individual and team experience you'll ever have in an event. The individual part is what you just talked about, Dan. It's related to the meaning. So everyone writes on the board something they want to break through. Example, when I broke my very first board 30 some years ago, the word I wrote was procrastination. And Incidentally, the best thing to do about procrastination, put it off. All right, anyways, mine was procrastination. I always wanted to write a book, and I always found a way to put it off. Well, I'll write my books when the kids are older. I'll write my books when I've saved up some money. I'll write my book when I have time. What was the only reason I didn't write my book? What was underneath that procrastination, jamming that in my face every day? Fear. And here's the simple truth. There's only one breakthrough. I've had close to 1 million people have this experience, right? Everyone has been awesome. Everyone has been personal because they bring their own meaning. But everyone's the same because the only breakthrough there is a breakthrough from fear to love. And that's it. All right. So on the front of the board, everyone writes, what is that obstacle? Fear of failure, not being good enough, something in your health, something in an emotion that gets better every day. On the back of the board, they write down what you focus on is what you create. They write down they write down something awesome. They write down, what am I going to be, do, create, have, feel in my life when I'm no longer allowing this limit to block my way, when I've moved beyond that rock to what I actually want. So example, when I wrote procrastination on the front of my board, on the back of my board, I wrote freedom, abundance, and truth to my word. And when I overcame the fear that was paralyzing me into procrastinating writing my book, and I wrote a book, I'd bring my family new abundance. We'd have freedoms we didn't know we had, and I'd be living my word every single day. And so that actual application of the vision is the real powerful individual aspect of the breakthrough. And what's kind of cool about it, it's all about the meaning you give to it. Nothing has any meaning except the meaning you give to it. All right, the team element is equally powerful because, as you remember, Dan, you'll never see people cheer like they cheer in this environment. We want each other to break through. All right, but what's fascinating about the breakthrough experience is that 99% of the breakthrough has nothing to do with your strength or coordination. Has only to do with your focus. And if you focus on the board, you will get what we call in training a learning experience. You'll get a board. You'll go, whoa, that's a piece of wood, all right, son of a gun. The second you hold your vision beyond the obstacle, it's like a piece of paper. And Dan, you were at probably one of the most unforgettable breakthrough experiences ever. Because if you'll remember, there was a young man there that day who was paralyzed.
Yep, Greg.
He had his spine severed when he was a young man. And everyone in that room, when we got to break the boards, he was in a wheelchair. His hands were kind of curled up like this. And his dad was with them. Everyone was in that room because they wanted a huge breakthrough in their life. They were there to create a big idea and turn it into reality. Well, 39 out of 40 people, I was doing this for your friend and my friend who just passed away this past year, Bob Proctor. And he had been ill, and I covered for him that day. And 39 out of 40, including you, had broken the board. And everybody thought, well, that's it. You know, this young man, he can't do it. You know, he's physically, he can't break a board. He can't hardly move his arms. But I saw in his eyes a vision that would not stop. I saw in his eyes a light. And so I went to him, which is, I don't usually do. The breakers come to me. But I went to him and I got down on my knee and I just looked him in the eye and said, you want to do this, don't you? And he said, yeah, I want to do it. And I just really emphasized to him to look in my eyes. Do not move your eyes. And this young man who had not moved his arm like this, straightened his arm out. It was almost like, for me, it was in slow motion. I watched this man, his fingers are curled up like this. They start to move forward. They start to open. He turns his hand and he plows through that board, never once moving his eyes from my eyes. Well, his father behind him crashes to the ground in sobbing tears. Everyone else rushed to him and hugged this kid. And I realized something very powerful in that moment. I realized that, you know, in the previous 15, 20 years that I had been doing this event, every so often, I would have somebody who I held for who would not break their board. They'd try a few times and they wouldn't do it. And it was, if you had lined up that group of people that had done it, every one of you, Ryan and Jeff and Jan, you would say, well, I get it. Because there was some physical thing usually related to it. But I realized in that moment when he broke his board that it wasn't their vision, it was mine. That I had believed a little bit that they were overachievers, that they'd gone as far as they could, but they couldn't do it. They'd done the best they could. Well, after he broke that board, from that point forward, I couldn't control anybody else, but I could control my belief in their possibility instead of their limit. And since that day, Dan, I've never had one person I've held for who has not broken through.
Awesome. I remember when Greg broke it, and it was as if we were at a like a professional sports, like a Stanley Cup, the Stanley Cup playoff game, the last game, and your home team just scored in their building. Like
with 1 second to go to win by one goal.
Yeah, it was. I got goosebumps just thinking about it. It was so loud, and it was only like 40 of us, and it was so loud. It was crazy. It was crazy because we all just sat there in awe because he was. Greg actually dove into a pool head first, and it was too shallow, and so that's how he was put in the wheelchair, and it was a scene that I don't think you can relive. You know what I mean? It was just so powerful. It was crazy.
That brings alive that principle that it brought it alive to me more than ever, which is change the way you look at people, the people you look at change. And if we're going to help people move towards their potential and realize they're not overachievers, it starts with our own belief. It starts with us being what I call truly positive Pygmalions. And that really moves into the second section of the book. And the second section of the book is about the second controllable, which is to energize and engage yourself and your team. Now, what I mean by the Pygmalion, bear with me for a second, real quick, so people get what that is. There is a myth in Greek mythology about what's called the Pygmalion effect. And the story goes that there was a man by the name of Pygmalion, and he was revered in his area. He was loved and thought well of. He was an artist. He was just a terrific guy. But in his own personal life, the story says he was very lonely. He had no one intimate and close to share his days with. Well, one day in the depths of his loneliness, Pygmalion finally said, I can't take it anymore. I don't want to be alone. I got to pour this out. I got to get this out of me. And so he poured himself into creating a sculpture, and he was a great artist. And I know you guys have all had this experience where you're so into something that time disappears. That's like 1 minute is a day is 1 minute in your mind. Well, that's the way he was when he was so passionate about creating this sculpture. And so he worked for 3 days and 3 nights, and hardly without even no eating, just focusing on doing it. Well, finally, after 3 days and 3 nights, he stood back and he looked at what he created. And what stood before him now was a statue. It was a statue of a woman, a sculpture of a woman. And the story says that as soon as he looked at it, he poured so much of himself into the statue that he instantly lost his heart and fell in love with it. Mm. Well, at that moment, the goddess of love, Aphrodite, decided, this Pygmalion, good dude, let's help him out this time. And so she descended down to earth behind him invisibly, pulled out a magical invisible golden bow and arrow, let fly with the arrow that was straight into the heart of the stone sculpture. Well, the legend says that the instant that arrow hit the stone, transformation occurred. And the statue turned into a living, breathing woman whose name was Galatea. Galatea opened her eyes. She saw Piggy. Piggy saw her. And they fell instantly in love and lived happily ever after. Now, give me a woo on that one, guys. Woo.
Woo.
Now, I don't know whether it's a true story or not. All right, but the principle it teaches is at the foundation of this concept called the Pygmalion effect. And the Pygmalion effect says that our thoughts, our beliefs, and our expectations are magnetic. That the way we see people is not only how we see them, but we're actually moving them in the direction of the way we see them. All right, in the same way that Pygmalion brought life to that statue by what he breathed into that statue. So when I looked at Greg that day and saw a flicker of possibility that he could do more than anyone dreamed he could do. Right? At that moment, I was actually moving that essence in the direction of that breakthrough. And so all of us have an opportunity, a will in our life, to be truly positive Pygmalions. Because we're already Pygmalions. The only question is what kind.
Yeah.
Do we elevate people by the way we see them? Do we hold them in neutral? Do we bring them down? Are we an energy vampire, pulling energy from them? And so I bet every one of here, and in fact, I'll ask you guys if you have somebody in your life who was this for you. I had a high school counselor, teacher and counselor by the name of Mr. Anderson, who was a remarkable Pygmalion for me. And in the 9th grade, he pulls me into his office one day, and he sits me down. Now, everybody loved this guy. He was one of those teachers you had who everybody loved because he treated us like we were adults instead of like dumb little kids.
Kids, yeah.
And he was fun, and he was great, and he was bright, and he teased you, and you just loved him. But he put me in his office this day, and he was very serious. And I've never seen him serious. He made me sit in a chair, and he stood up above me, and he crossed his arms, and he says, "Brian, a student like you only comes along once every 10 or 15 years. Now, guys, I got to tell you, when he said it, it is really likely he meant it bad more than he meant it good, right? Because at that time, all I cared about was I wanted everybody to like me. And so I was the class clown. All I was trying to do was sit around waiting for the moment to pounce with a very wrong comment that would create a laugh. All right. And I was doing okay in school. I was doing fine, but I wasn't trying my best because I didn't want to seem smart. Right. But Mr. Anderson, my positive Pygmalion, somehow saw in me what I couldn't see in myself. And the next words he said changed my life. And that's what Pygmalions do. He said, "Brian, there's something special in you. Stop wasting it."
Yeah.
He said, "Every day is a gift, but you and you alone determine if you'll open it." He said, "Son, you haven't opened one." He said, "Make each day your masterpiece. Make each day, pour all your energy into that day. So at the end of the day, all right, you need a refill." And it wasn't just what he said, because it's not just what Pygmalions say, it's the way he said it. It's because of what he saw. It got into my soul. And I guarantee you, I never would have turned my grades around that got me into Stanford University. That caused me to have to find a way to pay for Stanford University, which led me into coaching. Coaching led me to my wife and my children, right? I wouldn't be here today had that Pygmalion, not when I was 15 years old, seen in me more than I saw in myself. And so to help other people discover they're not overachievers is to be a truly positive Pygmalion.
I love that. Brian, you blew us all away again.
I bet you guys have somebody in your life who was like that, who at some point in your life believed in you more than you believed in yourself.
Yeah, it was the first boss of the first logistics company I ever worked for.
Awesome. What did he do? How did he transmit that to you?
He said, "Dan, you have so much talent in you, you're wasting it." I was on unemployment. I was at a bar, and I sold somebody a weight set in about 3 minutes because I was doing bodybuilding at the time, and I was like grade 9 dropout. I was, not really going anywhere in life. And he's like, "You need to come work for me because you have so much talent in you. You don't even understand it." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And then a couple of weeks later, I started at a logistics company, and it's brought me to here. I met my wife. I met pretty much same story, Brian. If I didn't get into logistics, I would never have met Rob and Jesse from Transcend. I would have never moved to Ontario. I would have never met my wife. I would have never, it's all the process. And it was one man that just said, "You have so much talent. You're wasting it just trying to sell people weight sets so you can drink."
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, and it was, and still to this day, he's a massive talent finder. Like, this man just sees talent in people that they never saw in themselves.
He sees the red and white yield signs. He's not stuck on the yellow. Yeah. Because he's looking for it. Remember, what you focus on is what you create. So you want to focus on what you want to create. That's about alertness. That's about looking for, what you seek, you will find. So as you look in people, look for their possibilities. One of the ways in the book that I talk about building people, teams, and relationships is understanding the relationship between recognition, acknowledgement, and praise. All right. And in other words, looking at and commenting on the good things that people have inside of them. And also occasionally looking at the rock. Now, when I was younger, I used to say that people who are great Pygmalions only look for the things they want to recognize, appreciate. I've changed that. It's the ratio of criticism to praise that really matters. Because I bet you, Dan, that first boss wasn't afraid to tell you when you were underachieving. Wasn't afraid to tell you, but to be honest and straight and authentic with you when he knew you had more in you and you weren't doing it, when you were sloughing. And that was very powerful and important. So what matters when you're working with people to energize them, to help them believe in themselves, is to make sure that you have a ratio of criticism and praise that's at least five praises for every one criticism. All right. And always end with a praise. Always end with a positive comment, because that's the one that bounces to tomorrow. That's the one that they'll remember when they start the day. All right. So, and every now and then it's important, though, as a positive Pygmalion, to say, you're better than this. All right. I know that you have more inside of you, because sometimes we got to feel a little bit of the pain to move to the pleasure, to move to the breakthrough.
Sorry, I'm just blocking a bunch of
I know.
comments
I was
here that
just
were
shaking
coming
my
through.
head.
Sorry about that, Brian. There was just some pretty rude comments that came through from somebody on YouTube. It was a bot for sure, but yeah.
Technology again, the greatest.
Oh yes. Sometimes we get trolls. They're everywhere. But yeah. It's Ryan. What about you? Have you ever had a Pygmalion, a positive Pygmalion in your life?
Yeah,
Mr. Anderson, that teacher was definitely that for me, and Coach Wooden was definitely that for me. John Wooden gave people the most important gift to help them bring out their best. Everybody looks at his record and his championships and what an incredible coach he was. But the real secret to John Wooden was the one that all of us have available to us to help build people, build teams, and build relationships. John Wooden was the most fully present person I've ever met. When you were with John Wooden, now think about it. It's like sitting with a legend. The guy that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm with the greatest there ever was at what he did. And yet, when you finished any time with him, 5 minutes or an hour, you felt like the important one. You felt like he respected and admired you. You felt like he was so excited to have had the chance to pass your way. So being fully present, this is great. We're in December here, and we're starting out on the this wonderful time of the year. The most important way to help people discover their potential is to give them the greatest gift, which is to be fully present. And when you're fully present, it means that 100% of your mind, body, and spirit is with the person you're with where they are now. Now, whenever you're fully present, you say to that person the one thing you must communicate as a positive Pygmalion, the one thing you must communicate if they're going to believe in their possibilities. By being present, you say to that person, unshakably, unfakeably, you're important. You matter. You're significant. And whenever you're not present, you speak louder. And people get it right away. How many of you, anyone, the people who are watching the podcast, you guys right here, how many of you know when you're with somebody if they're fully present or not?
100%.
Boom, you can tell immediately. All right? And whenever somebody's not present with us, it makes us feel worthless. It makes us feel insignificant and unimportant. And so that concept of being fully present is the heart both of helping people energize themselves, because when people feel important, they rise to it, oh yeah. And when people feel unimportant, they fall to a oh no. All right? And so if you want to give the ultimate gift this holiday, pick out 2 people in your life who for the next 30 days you commit to be more fully present with. Doesn't spend one, it could be at work and one at home. Doesn't mean you have to spend more time with them. Right? You may have less time. But when you're with them, put the cell phone down. When you're with them, ask more than tell. And then do what most of us rarely do. When they're talking, actually listen before you formulate your response. Take it in. All right. You watch. After 3 days of being more present consciously, they're going to look at you and go, have you been working out? You are looking really good. Right? And as you become more present with those two, you'll develop that present muscle until you provide it to virtually everyone you know. And that is the gift. That is the ultimate gift of helping people rise, is to help them know that they matter, that they're important, that they count. You know, my favorite movie, and I write about this in the book, of all time, I'm a cornball, but my favorite movie of all time is still It's a Wonderful Life. It's the Christmas movie about a guy named George Bailey, who just is an authentic guy, who's played by Jimmy Stewart, who perfect role. And he just can't help himself. He cares about people. And he doesn't want any credit for it. And he doesn't do it he does it because it's his character, not his reputation. See, your character is who you are. Your reputation only what others think you are. And yet he doesn't see that he matters. He doesn't know that he's important. Yeah. And so it takes his guardian angel coming down to earth by the name of Clarence, who doesn't have his wings yet, all right, to help him see the world as it would have been had he not been there. Mm-hmm. And suddenly he recognizes, wow, I really did have a wonderful life. In other words, every little kindness that he took for granted that he gave made a difference way beyond that immediate moment, because it made somebody else feel different, who treated somebody else differently, and set off a chain reaction, a ripple effect. And so the concept of being fully present extends beyond that initial moment with that person. It starts to help other people be present, help other people to reach out and build this ripple effect. And so that's what There Are No Overachievers is ultimately about, is helping people to help each other recognize that they're not overachievers, to be positive Pygmalions, to open their vision to what you focus on is what you create. Stop using your memory to see. And understand that energy is a choice, and we can energize and engage the people around us by understanding that our energy is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Jeff, Ryan, did you guys have a positive Pygmalion in your life that you wanted to share before we get moving?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can name him right now. Nick This. I'm still friends with him after all these years. He was my boss, and I took his position, and it started the whole chaotic venture of logistics. And he believed in me, and he gave me a shot. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting in his seat, and everything blossomed from there. I didn't want to be a manager. I just wanted to be a warehouse worker. That's all. That was all my intentions that I ever wanted to do. But I wanted to be the best at that position, being a warehouse guy and doing everything better than anybody else. And he just saw something, and he said, "Hey, listen." And that was it. And things just started moving and moving. And another guy I can say is Mike Q. And I still have that conversation today, and I say it on the show all the time. I'm not a sales guy, but he always said to me, "Jeff, I've worked with you for 8 to 9 years. You don't know that you're a sales guy, but you actually are." And he says, "You're better than what you think you are," And, I mean, this is later on in life, because I never was in this position. And he talks to me, every week or something like that. And, and he's making me realize things that I never realized before.
So. He was your Clarence, and you were George Bailey. There you
go.
There you go. Yep.
And the rest is history.
As they say. Yeah. Ryan, what about you, brother?
I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I don't think there was an actual person for me. I think for me where my life kind of changed was my first dog. I never had dogs, never had animals growing up or anything like that. And it just happened randomly, right? It was a completely random story that we're looking for a dog. But having that dog for the first year and a half was going through all the emotions, the biting, actually caring for something. My wife always kind of made jokes and said, Ryan never wants to be far away from Raja, who was my first dog. So even if I wasn't even if we had to go to a wedding or a birthday party or something like that, it's like, okay, I'm kind of looking at, I wasn't present, as Brian was kind of saying, because I was so focused on my dog, so focused to just want to hang out with him and things like that. And, you know, unfortunately, when he passed away, that kind of bloomed my life into different things. Like I'm big into dog rescue right now. That's all I do right now. That's my passion. That's what I want to do. And mind you, I got my first dog in 2018. So I'm turning 34 this year. You know, I've never had a dog for that X amount of years. So I think for me, just like learning from dogs, I have 3 dogs now, is like learning that, you know, there's nonverbal communication and the things that you can just learn from just sitting and being present with them, right? Like as we're talking here, I don't know if you guys kind of notice, but both of my dogs are right here scratching for love, right? So yeah, they're scratching for love, but at the end of the day, they're kind of telling me those things. So for me, like I have the similar story when it comes to like logistics. I won't get into it, but it's kind of like the same kind of story. You know, somebody kind of believed in me and like they said, Ryan, you have so much potential. It's time to act on your potential, and I'll just leave it at that. But for me, it's definitely dogs. You know, it's definitely my first dog, Raja. Rest in peace, my little boy. But
Ryan, that is such a great thing. I'm going to remember that forever because, you know, I too have absolutely loved my dogs. And dogs, when you have a dog that you've created that connection with, they are the most present beings on the planet. You know, they are there. They are going to be there. You know, and so they're imparting that sense to you, that same sense that you matter, that you're important, that you care. I love it. That's really great. And
Stanley hasn't left my side since I got sick.
Walking right around you. I kept seeing this white tail just going right.
Yeah. I got a golden retriever and a Saint Bernard. But here's the funny thing: our third dog, she's the most independent. She's upstairs sleeping, so she does not care about the love. It's like she's Miss Independent. But yeah, that's it made me think a lot. And you know, Brian, as you're kind of talking here, like I love John Wooden. He's like, you know, he's won 10 championships in 12 years, 7 in a row. I can talk sports because like you're a sports guy as well. And I think one of the things I really like about him was that he had guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like probably with the greatest center of all time, Bill Walton, like those kind of people to kind of bounce off. And I want to ask you a question with you sitting with him. Did you ever ask him why he never went pro? Because for me, and I'm not trying to be ignorant here, but like it's like when you're kind of teaching college, you're like, okay, you're kind of like in the minor leagues. Why wouldn't you want to take your shot in like the big leagues? They kind of say in like the NBA. What was his kind of like thoughts or kind of feedback? If you ever had that conversation, why he didn't go to the NBA and become as great as he is?
Because John Wooden, the greatest coach of all time, never once called himself coach. He was a teacher. That's what he called himself. That's what he saw his purpose in life, his professional purpose was to be a teacher. And so, you know, it's a little different these days because you don't get these student athletes for 4 years, you know, in college basketball, you get them for a year. But the reason he never cared about going pro, and he was certainly offered that, was really 2 elements. Number one, because he loved to teach and he felt that college age was a place where he could have the greatest impact as a teacher.
That's true.
All right. The second reason was that he was completely about character and not reputation. He could care less, and he didn't really like professional basketball. Like example. I mean, his favorite basketball by the time he finished was women's college basketball because it was more fundamental. Coach Wooden did not like the dunk. You know, he thought, and if you recall, when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then called Lou Alcindor, was at UCLA, college basketball banned the dunk. It was not a legal shot for a couple of years because of Kareem. He was so dominant that, you know, he was, at that time there weren't 1,000,000 7-footers, and he was so dominant that they banned the shot. All right, but Coach Wooden realized this is a window of opportunity. All right, and in other words, you're going to have to, because he said the dunk takes no real talent. It just takes, you know, athleticism. He says, this is going to be better for you. And that's where he learned the sky hook, probably the most dominant shot in the history of the sport, because he was not allowed to dunk. He used to use the backboard for shots up. So that was John Wooden. He was a teacher, and that's why he chose never to go pro. He didn't feel it was the best form of basketball, and it didn't give him the best opportunity to teach. And it wasn't teaching basketball, it was teaching life.
Teaching life. Like it wasn't ability to poor man's wealth, right?
Yeah, it does.
I love that. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Before we get going today, just so everybody knows, I want to just thank Brian. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to have you back on the 13th for the 12 days of Christmas. It's sales chatter away in one day. Oh, that rhymed, Ryan. Did you see that?
Yeah,
That
wow.
was a total rhymer. Yeah, I know. I totally just didn't even think of that network.
Gotta write that one
Um,
down.
I know. Special thanks to Daman and American Group and Centurion Trucking. If you are an agent and you're looking, Daman is putting a big push on US and Canadian agents, looking up to 60% GP. So give Daman a call. Pay attention to the video at the end here. I'll let Ryan take it out.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an incredible opportunity for any agent out there. 60% up to 60% GP. That's amazing. But like I want to say, Brian, this was amazing. This is something that we can all practical. Like for me, I look forward to these Thursday sessions because I get to replay them and actually think about it. And I know you guys have already picked out your 2 people for the next 30 days who you're going to value and you're going to be present with. So thank you so much, Brian, for that. That is amazing. And thank you for giving me the ups because that G1 driving test that I did, that I picked the yield color being red and white. I was right. So shout out to that. I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning in the audience. We love the thoughtful comments. And, it's just the impact because we always see a different kind of audience as the new presenter comes on. And it's amazing to see. So if you did find value with this, please comment, share it with somebody that you think that could bring value. There's so many nuggets of this podcast that we had today. We'll hit the replay again at 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern time on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll see you guys tomorrow for wins and lessons for the week. And yeah, let's get ready for Tuesday. We're going to have so much fun. Thank you, everybody. Jeff, Dan, Brian, love you guys.
Joy to y'all. Thank you so much. I'll be joy to y'all.
Centurion Trucking. Our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion Trucking and start designing your career today.